I'm joined by First Coast News anchor and reporter Jasmine Monroe. Good morning, Jasmine.
Hi, good morning, Ann.
Jim Piggott, longtime City Hall reporter at News for Jax. Welcome back, Jim.
It's interesting to be here. It's a lot of fun, I think.
It's great to have
You
you.
think?
So far, so good. John Bachman, former anchor at former at Action News Jax.
There you go.
And now partner at Bachman Galnor Communications. Hey, John.
Hello. It's good to be here.
Nice
Thank you
to
very much.
see you. And, also here, former City Council member and attorney Randy DeFoor. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning, Ann. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. So let's start with the story of a local criminal defense attorney who was arrested Sunday, allegedly for bringing drug-soaked paperwork into the Duval County Jail. Jasmine, what exactly is being alleged here?
Yeah, so basically what's being alleged, this operation is what they had under called stamp collection, was launched back in February of 2024 due to the rising of the drug overdoses inside of the jail. So this was synthetic marijuana. His name is, the defense attorney is Nathaniel Williams. And this operation, of course, was something that, he was thinking that he was getting away with, but it was under investigation for, almost a year now. So with that being said, the overdoses in the jail, they said, dropped from 23 into 2023, I should say, to 9 in 2024. And Williams faces 8 third-degree felonies for his involvement. So I think, actually one of my first stories ever covering back in Pittsburgh was a defense attorney smuggling cell phones into jails. So, that's a big thing too as well. But I think people tend to, when you're getting away with it, you think that you're never going to get caught. But Sheriff T.K. Waters and the undersheriff mentioned, it doesn't matter who you are, you take that pledge, and when it comes to being a defense attorney, they trust you to be doing what you're supposed to be doing. But this synthetic drug, or K2 on the street, is what it's known for. It's soaked papers, and bring them in a briefcase. You can't even, sometimes drug sniffing dogs can't even tell what it is.
And so they say that he was specifically using his access as a defense attorney. So he's meeting with clients in the jail and then passing them this paperwork disguised as kind of legal documents?
Yes. So, basically we couldn't see what was in those legal documents, but it honestly doesn't matter. When some of the poison control stories that we got a chance to see, they say it's easy, but oftentimes you don't even know what that synthetic drug is doused with. It could be rat poisoning. It could be anything, but it's basically just a chemical drug. And, you lay those papers inside of it, soak it in, and then you can bring it in via anywhere, oftentimes on airplanes and things like that too as well.
Yeah. And John Bachman, this is obviously concerning for jail officials who've been dealing, as Jasmine noted, there's been a number of overdose deaths, a lot of them kind of fentanyl-related overdose deaths. And I shouldn't say a lot. I mean, there's been, fewer than 10, but of course, any is a problem. And this K2 drug in particular has been a problem around the country in terms
For years.
of, yeah.
And
creating, problems in
Usually with K2 though, when we were reporting on it regularly, it was more of of an access, right? Like it's a synthetic drug that you could find at a gas station, and so kids were able to get access to it rather than, some of the other drugs that were maybe harder to get. But anyway, that you always heard about it that way. You didn't. This is kind of a unique situation where you're hearing about it, being put on paper and smuggled in somewhere.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is also, Jim, this was a drug that I know that in New York, there was kind of this like zombie incident where there was people who were just kind of like disabled by this drug. And
South Florida too, I remember.
Yeah,
A big
that's
case
right.
where the guy went crazy.
And so it can be, I mean, obviously from
Hallucination.
controlling
Yeah.
the environment inside of a
But I
correctional
think a
institution.
lot of people are looking at it. This is the first time they've heard of it happening like this in the jail. We've heard of drug overdoses in the jail before. There have been deaths in their lawsuits as a result of that. And now with this case, they're taking a look again. Those lawyers, and Randy, you know this,
Yeah.
are looking at this and saying, hey, does this apply to where these overdoses have occurred? Because of this drug, I don't think within the jail there have been any overdoses from it. That's correct from what TK Waters was saying?
I can't speak on that, but I would say
Yeah.
as of right now,
And-
no.
Yeah, like as we said, fentanyl has been a problem.
Right.
This particular usage, I don't think that they've tied any overdoses directly to this transaction that they busted him on.
But I knew when they started that news conference, they were talking about the seriousness of overdoses. And then Randy DeFoor,
Yeah.
I mean, would that be something that attorneys are going to get involved with.
Well, I think what's going to happen is, I mean, first of all, it's despicable as an attorney. I mean, that's a
Right.
violation of trust and of the oath we take as an attorney, and he'll obviously be disbarred and incarcerated. Um, but I think they're going to have to look at what that's going to impact is what can a lawyer give to their client,
Mm.
right, in the jail. I'm sure that's going to have a
And what's
huge negative
subjected to
impact.
searches and,
Yeah.
and
Right.
whatnot, right?
Correct.
Well,
Or
I mean, I've
some
already
type of testing. I mean,
Right.
maybe
Right.
there's testing of the paperwork
Right.
as you
I
come
think
in.
the thing that was so, jarring too as well, what the undersheriff was talking about was you don't know how to particularly handle what's happening, the overdoses, because you don't know what that inmate had taken. So it's something that you can either shoot up, you can smoke. So you really don't know how to handle it because they were saying some of the inmates were suffering from seizures and hallucinations. So I think that's the scary part too as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that there have been rules at the jail in the past to prevent the passage of paper from, to inmates, and that's restricted investigators. For a while, they were having to use iPads or tablets of some kind to sort of show their clients paperwork. But it's a huge challenge to do that, and I think that up until now, lawyers themselves, Randy, have been trusted to
Right.
handle that paperwork, but now they're going to have to hand all of it over, have it copied, have the originals destroyed before they can
And I'm sure that
transact it.
comes at a cost, right? I mean, someone's paying for that.
A cost, and I would think I mean, it makes it an enormous hassle for attorneys who are in and out of the jail trying to
Trying to
deal
do
with.
their job, to represent their clients. I mean, it's that's why it's again for an attorney to do this is just despicable.
Have we heard of this happening at other facilities?
Yeah, I mean, it is a really widespread problem. And in fact, there's been some research as to what happened during COVID, because that was a really interesting example of under lockdown, did the flow of drugs into correctional facilities stop? Because, family visits were off limits.
Right.
They were limiting, all kinds of access. The only people that could get in there were essentially attorneys and the people that worked there. And they found that the usage and the presence of drugs increased enormously in that period.
Increased,
Yeah.
not
Wow.
decreased.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the Miami Times or Miami Herald did a big story on that. So it is interesting. Obviously, there's been concerns about correctional facilities and the people who work there. There have been arrests, even in this facility of former employees, Jim, that had been
Right.
arrested for bringing
And
drugs in.
I do remember that from the past years, but I mean, this whole idea of paper, that just still surprises me. I remember at one time LSD used to be like you could pass that as paper, but I was
Jim's
real
showing
surprised.
his age there.
Yeah, I know I am. But that's what I recall, and that's what this surprised me, that, the documents on this. And I was surprised they didn't show us what type of documents.
Yeah.
When I saw that in the news and they showed the paperwork, it was all blacked out.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's things like that because you don't know if it's the ink or what exactly is it. I mean, I would of course love to investigate further along into this, but it if you're a lawyer or an attorney, you're going inside of a jail, honestly trying to do your job. It just makes that one more step that you have to do, and sometimes that can hinder a complete investigation.
I mean, John, this does impact families to the extent that, in trying to cut down on contraband, there have been moves, for instance, in the prison system to move inmates further away from family and friends to make that more difficult, or to restrict or eliminate mail altogether.
There are all kinds of consequences to anything like this when you have a breach, right? Because the automatic reaction is to shut it down and to keep it from happening. So yeah, you've got the unintended consequences of added steps that attorneys will have to probably go through in order to get to their client. Perhaps they start limiting even further the contact that family members have or friends have with inmates. I mean, it's always, the one bad apple soils the bunch. So it'll have consequences for sure, at least in the short term, and then we'll see whether it sort of ebbs back, as things relax as you go forward.
And Randy, obviously, this has to be, go through the criminal justice system. He is not convicted. He's just been arrested. He's bonded out. But what, practically speaking, happens to this man's clients in the interim?
This man will be suspended, I would imagine, immediately from the bar, and this client will have to find another, attorney.
Yeah. It happens that quickly. I mean, I feel like there's at least one other case I've been following of an attorney who got arrested for something and still has clients. So
Well,
Um,
that's shocking. It may not. I mean, if I were the client, I would go ahead and find another attorney.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good idea.
might be
But
a
we
good
don't know what the client may be facing too. I mean, if
Yeah,
there
it was
was some
21 people.
Right.
So
that he was currently representing.
no. Jacksonville, they arrested 21 individuals, so he wasn't the only person to.
I got you.
Right.
Yeah.
I got
So
you.
they may have arrested the client too, because likely there was an
Sure.
exchange of.
And did he
Paper.
say what the other 21 people who they were?
No.
We
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, I'm just curious because if they were, yeah,
Yeah, who else was involved?
Yeah.
Right.
right, and how?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you're just joining us, we're talking about the biggest headlines of the week. If you would like to join our conversation, you can give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. And if you want to look at all these lovely faces, you can check out our live stream on the WJCT YouTube page or on Facebook. I want to move on now to a topic, a new sort of take 'em down debate, not over the Confederate statues for once, but over an airport hologram, a new feature at the Jacksonville airport, welcoming guests, the mayor, in this little box. And it has proven controversial, I think it's fair to say. John, start us off. What's happening here?
Well, I mean, the facts of the matter is that the city put the mayor in a hologram at the airport to welcome visitors and I guess folks returning home to Jacksonville at the airport. It's not unusual for a mayor to be in that welcoming committee, if you will. If you've traveled anywhere, you know that happens at a lot, if not almost every other airport around. You maybe not in a hologram sense. In fact, I will say this is the first hologram in an airport that I've seen in my limited travels. But for years, there'd be videos of the mayor of Atlanta welcoming you to Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, for example. So the idea of this is not new. The hologram aspect of it is. I think it was at $20,000 for that. And I don't know what it costs to make a video for this. And, I don't know any of the other things. Some people have taken issue with that. And I'm not all that surprised that somebody's taken issue with it.
Yeah.
Just
I mean, the cost is in kind of a flexible thing that we're seeing here, Jim, because I think initially the city said it was about $30,000. And then the city council auditor looked into kind of all of the trappings that it took to produce this thing. And it was closer to like $75,000.
That's right. It's 75,000. It's an elaborate, at least the pictures that I've seen, thing that's out there. I wish I'd gone to the airport this week to see it because it's amazing what they can do with this hologram and what the plans are for the future of this. I remember when I wasn't retired yet, it's only been, 6 months, 4 months, whatever, 6 months. And this was being talked about. It was in the planning stage that they were doing this. I think it was like last January. Different things were going to happen with this hologram. It can be interactive. They hoped to use this somehow with the planning department and with permitting to allow people to come in and ask questions like, where can I get this permit? And it would answer those questions. So this was in like just a practice stage out at the airport. They had this, and they said, hey, we could use this, the mayor's office, to welcome people to Jacksonville. And the thing is, though, where the council was raising the objection is the funding of this, of where that money is coming from, and that's from permitting. And with permitting, if you recall, has been one of the biggest issues facing the mayor's office, the city, and the length of time it takes to get a permit in Jacksonville. And the money that they had budgeted for this, the millions of dollars for permitting, is going to this hologram out at the airport. And that's been the complaint. And that's where Nick Howland, I think, but Roy Diamond, Councilman Diamond, is the one that dubbed this the Donna or the
Holo
Holy.
Donna.
Yeah, and he has been the most vocal about this, talking about this. But I'm sure Randy DeFoor would know, as a former city council member, your thoughts on this and the fact that the money is coming from permitting.
I like that Jim Piggott's still
I know.
grilling you.
Yeah, I can't help
Retired
it.
or not.
I'm sitting next to her and I'm going, yes,
I
can
was
do it.
telling him earlier, Jim, you're the only one that made me cry.
And I hope to
I
make
was
you
on the
laugh
council.
today.
No. Well, if sure, a couple of things. One, I have seen it, and it's really cool. I think it's a great idea. I mean, we are trying to create um, a reputation, if you will, of the fintech city, a technology city. So when you come into Jacksonville, that would speak to that, wouldn't it? And it's certainly better than the rocking chairs that are there. So I think the bigger
I like
issue.
the rocking
I
chairs.
like to.
I
I'm from up north, so when I
Okay,
see 'em, I'm
I agree.
like,
But
yeah.
it's a great way to businesses when they're visiting, they can see that we're cutting edge. So I think it's a great idea. I think if there was a mistake made, it was where did they pay for it,
Hmm.
and that is a very restricted fund. And so I think if I were the administration, I would consider, uh, I would use a different fund, an economic development fund, some other fund for that
Instead of
particular
money
event.
that comes in from permitting.
Right, because it's actually restricted. I mean, it's legally restricted from the state.
Okay.
And so you can't use it for that. It has to be literally
Very specific.
very, related to permitting. So if I were them, I understand that it was in relation, they're claiming it was in relation to the permitting because they're using it as a test case. But that, again, I think there's a real legitimate use for it. So let's put it where it needs to belong for the funding of it.
Got a call from Alan on the south side. Good morning, Alan. Go ahead.
Hi, I'd like to hear the panel comment on the heartburn with this versus the relative lack of heartburn back when Lenny Curry had his 15-foot high face on billboards going into and out of, say, LAX. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Alan. It's a good memory there. There was an effort to sort of gin up interest in the city of Jacksonville, John, with billboards around the country.
And I don't know where that money came from, but I think, as we've already hit on, I think the real issue with this is, in fact, the source of the funding. I don't think anybody says that the mayor shouldn't be welcoming people into our city or any of those kinds of things. It's where did the money come from? And again, I don't remember. Jim may remember where the money for those billboards came, but maybe that might be the difference.
Well, that's where I would defer to Randy because it was around that time.
Yeah,
I do remember those billboards.
I
I
do too.
remember they were the butt of
Why
them.
does Cleveland stand out? I feel like there was one in Cleveland too for some reason.
Yeah,
and I don't
they
remember
were
that.
What year
around-
was it? I was in Cleveland during that time.
No, they were around the country, and
Yeah.
there was a lot. There were many jokes made about that. I
Right.
remember,
Yeah.
but those billboards weren't only in Jacksonville;
Yeah.
they were around promoting Jacksonville, and I think some of that came from various departments, or whatever,
Right.
to do that.
I don't
We'd have to
recall
go
where the
look,
funding
yeah.
came from, but
But it was not a source of controversy
but
at
it
the
was
time.
not a
the
source.
funding.
And my
of-
point would be, without us knowing the details of that's probably the difference, right?
Yeah.
well, and I think, forgive me, but I think also you have a Democratic mayor and you have a Republican council, and they're going to throw stones at her any way they can, and so you can't give them. The bottom line is the administration really can't afford to give them anything to throw stones at.
Yeah. Jasmine. The hologram itself is pretty neat looking, although
Yeah.
it sort of looks like, to me, one of those Barbie box.
Yeah,
photos.
I thought it was a bit odd too,
Yeah.
but
I mean, I'm going to say it all the time. I'm always for technology. I think it's going to help us. I think even with Chat GPT, you think about all of the things that we once laughed about before. It's something that's instituted now. It's mandatory in some companies. If you're not ahead of it, you're behind. And when you're behind, you really lose out on the opportunity to either get more people to come to the city to help build and fund and, want to build here. So I feel like Jacksonville, like I say, I compare it to Cleveland. I think it's funny. I compare it to Cleveland a lot because Cleveland had the future of CLE. They had this whole big thing, and it was
CLE.
as in Cleveland,
yeah.
CLE.
CLE,
Oh,
yeah.
It really took off.
Yeah, right. But it's
They needed
something-
more billboards in
they-
Jacksonville.
They should have did a billboard in Jacksonville. I'll talk to Mayor Bibb. But I just think technology is important. So even when you see that, when you first walk into Jacksonville, it is so inviting, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, it's inviting because I start to think about what happens in classrooms when your teacher has to call off and they can record something and they can send it, and it doesn't make it feel like you're sitting at home. You feel like you're a part of something when you see something like that.
Right.
So
Right.
I think it's the big deal is the price point. If it's $75,000, I do believe that is a lot to spend on a welcoming sign when you
Yeah.
know you could found it somewhere else.
Right.
I looked up the Lenny Curry billboards.
Okay.
And basically, it says the mayor, according to a spokesperson, the city spent $45,000 in taxpayer money on the billboards, and that money came from the mayor's contingency fund. He's got like $100,000 a year to do that.
Yeah.
So that came from the mayor's office budget to do that. And this was from a story at News4 Jax back in July of 2021.
We've got an email from Paul in St. John's. He's saying Ron Salem, who's the finance committee chair who was involved in this discussion. Ron Salem isn't mad that it's a hologram. He's mad that it's not of him. He's such a mayor wannabe. We also have a call from JD in Sea Island. Good morning. Go ahead.
Good morning. My comment is about my very favorite president of all the presidents, the one that did more for the average hardworking person all over the world after he was president than all of them during and after the rest of them. Me and Jimmy Carter, actually, I helped him build the first Habitat, the Habitat for Humanity, I believe it was the 1980s, over there off of 45th Street. Those were the very first ones here in Jacksonville, and I helped, was one of the volunteers, and that's how I actually met Jimmy Carter. Like I said, God rest him in peace. He was truly a dignified gentleman that we had as a president of the United States. And I wish him nothing but the very best.
Well, thanks, JD. Nice comment. Appreciate your work helping to build homes, too, for people. We've got a call from, Don from North Jacksonville. Go ahead, Don.
Good morning, everyone. My comment this morning is this issue, this controversy with the hologram at the airport with the Mayor Donna Deegan feels like it's more of a politics and a partisan reason to start arguments. When you look at the use of funds and budgets the past years in Jacksonville, and not just in Jacksonville, but I would say cities around the country, they're misused and nobody really makes a really big deal about it. And they're making a big deal out of this when funds have been used in a very wrong way in other instances in the past. And I want to get your reaction on that.
Yeah, I mean, Jim Piggott, it's not a ton of money, but, you know from reporting on these kinds of things over the years, they can get sticky. I mean, sometimes issues, even if they're not a giant amount of money, I think we all remember the Pat Lockett-Felder statue to herself. Sometimes that can just end up being more trouble than it's worth or more problematic than people might anticipate.
It's just an issue like when you see something that's out of the ordinary and they're going to go, what? And how we're spending money on that? I think that, as we had all mentioned, that hologram, it stands out. And it's
Right.
I've been reading, they're making it a political issue. It highlights the Mayor Donna Deegan, and it's a way that she's going to use it as a campaign thing. I think that's what many people have been saying. That's not true. That's not what's happening up there. It's welcoming people to Jacksonville, but they see it as a way that the mayor's promoting herself, and that's where I think the controversy is coming in from that. And we've seen that many things like throughout history of Jacksonville, where statues, like you mentioned, have gone up, or billboards. We're talking about Lenny Curry. It's a way that politicians do something on that, and it's going to be an issue. I mean, I see where the concern is with this, with the money, but it's also something, if it's going to be there for 6 months, that's what the contract is for. Then it moves on, and we'll see what happens.
Randy, how much of this is just pure politics, and how much of it is
100%. It is. I mean, because the hologram is her, representing Jacksonville, not
her?
Donna representing Donna. So this is 100% political, no doubt about it.
And you don't.
Well, other than the funding, I think there's a legitimate. That's what I'm saying. I mean, the administration needs to be very careful because don't give the council any, anything to throw stones at. So I think they just need to find a different funding source, and it's all good.
All right, we got a call from Regina in Mandarin. Good morning, Regina. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thanks for taking my call. Always enjoy the Friday morning show. I would like to continue with this political. I 100% agree. It's political. The state went overwhelmingly for the Republican president and other electives. officials. We've already seen that with taking the Confederate statues down. What other things are people like politically pointing the finger at our mayor, who I think is doing an excellent job? And I think it's because she's a woman also. And I'll take all your comments off the air. Thanks a lot. Have a
Thanks,
good day.
Regina. Your thoughts, Jim?
Definitely. I mean, as Randy just said, I mean, the political aspect of this, and that's what we're having. We see that with, Ron Salem going after the mayor, Roy Diamond going after the mayor, Nick Howland making these comments. It's all this back and forth thing. I think we were discussing this before the show of what's happening. We're seeing all the politics play out that Mayor
Nationwide.
Deegan is she's having a very hard time with this council, but we knew it was going to be this way. We knew that as a Republican versus a Democrat, and that's what's happening. It's all political.
Yeah.
I'd love to share a quick Jimmy Carter story if I could. To get back
Please
to that
do.
call. This is to emphasize the president's longevity, if you will. Just think about this for a minute. I have been in Jacksonville for 10 years. I was in Atlanta for 7 years before that. 3 years, it's probably been about 15 years now. Somebody can check the facts on when the president was diagnosed with brain cancer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Brain cancer at the age of, what would that have been, 85. At that point, WSB, where I worked, said, John, if in fact the president were to pass, here is a drive full of file video. Carry this with you at all times. And when we get word, you're going to go to the Carter Center, and that's where you're going to be until we're done with the coverage. I said, okay. That was 15 years ago. I have been gone from WSB from 15 years. And I mean, it's just remarkable that
Because you were almost on
we were
call,
on
essentially.
watch.
Yeah.
We were on watch 15 years ago. And there were just cases, right? He was in hospice for 2 years almost. It's remarkable. All the things the caller said were 100% true, but just a nod to the Carter family. I got to know his grandson when I was up there, Jason. Just a spectacular human being. So.
I mean, to your point, they were reporting yesterday on NPR that two of the people that eulogized the former president, Walter Mondale and
Ford.
and Gerald Ford, that they both passed and their sons had to deliver the eulogies because they, he outlived everyone. So
Yeah,
anyway,
outlived
yeah.
A
everybody.
true
And-
public servant.
Right.
I would like to say, just being at his funeral, seeing all of our former and current presidents together, it's
Right.
been so hard in journalism, life period, to seeing back and forth versus the aisles. But being able to see everyone together, and he still finished. Like, that was like his one last thing
Great
that
point.
he did before he left this planet. And it's just so commendable. And you talk about like coverage that you did. I used to work in Tallahassee. I mean, we had, news stories, packages already written, ready to go and ready to air just in case. And, he's an incredible man. Listening to the stories, every story is completely different, no matter who you are, what color skin you are, your age. He had a story for everyone. And teaching Sunday school, how did he have time to do all of this?
And the fact that his role here in Jacksonville, as the caller had mentioned with Habitat's, and building those homes, I remember him being here. He had a big impact in this city, a very Republican city at the time. And then you heard many of the people that worked with him, worked in his administration. It's like Mike Hightower.
Right.
He's been talking about that. Who was a Democrat at the time, now a Republican, and it was just so interesting. And that funeral, and watching the funeral, and all the former presidents that are alive were being there. That's how things used to be. People would get along in politics. They'd work across the aisle, and that's kind of what I do miss is that partyism right now is like, oh, I'm not going to do anything with the Democrats. I'm not going to do anything with the Republicans, but we saw that they were together, and I think that brought back a lot of hope for people to see that happen.
I totally agree, because when you saw like Obama talking to Trump,
Yes.
and you
I know,
saw them
powerful.
all acting with each other, it's a reminder that the president of the United States is our president, no matter
matter
what
what.
party they belong to.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. Very good.
If you're just joining us, we are talking to John Bachman, Jasmine Monroe, Jim Piggott, and Randy DeFoor about the week's headlines. And you can join our conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. I do want to shift a little bit to a topic that has been also in the headlines about the homeless community in Jacksonville, some of the efforts to comply with state law, and reducing that population, providing shelter for that population. Part of that is sending people away through this program called Homeward Bound. And now some people are saying that because the beaches communities aren't eligible for that funding, that now it's becoming a refuge or a haven for additional homeless people. So that is a topic that's been in the news. Rory Diamond also kind of making that point. He represents the beaches, saying this is unfair to my constituents because they're now kind of getting the brunt of a problem that the city is shifting.
And it's interesting to watch how this is playing out, I think, of these programs that are supposed to be in place that are not. I thought it was also interesting. I was watching the arrests, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, of the number of people that have violated the new homeless statutes in here, the number of people that have been arrested because of that, camping out on the street. And I was kind of taken aback by that. I'm going, really? They're arresting people now for sleeping on the street.
But those numbers actually are, so this is JFRD, the
Yes.
fire department is going out as part of their program and interacting with people, urging them to go into shelters or in some cases leave. But they've issued 589 warnings. They've arrested 86 people as of the most recent numbers and bust out 93. So yeah, there have been arrests. Those people, I guess, are either in jail briefly or in jail currently.
Well,
think-
I just think that's surprising.
Yeah, the busing out is crazy. I know that I had family in town for Christmas, and my stepdad, who originally is from Orlando, came up and said, oh, there's couches right outside of the stadium and things like that. And I said, that's all gone. Like they're cleaning up the homelessness, and I don't want to say cleaning up because that's not a good way to say it, but that's honestly what they're doing. That's the move that they're going. And when I heard busing out people, giving them a one-way ticket to go somewhere so they can sleep somewhere else.
Yeah. And it's not entirely new, John. I mean, this is not a program that Jacksonville has invented. Cities all over the country are using similar programs to, diminish their unhoused population. Some of those people are being bused to Jacksonville because this is where they're from.
Yeah, and I would say that the city has developed a 10 or 12-step plan to address this issue. And not only that, it's really to address the law that was enacted to
This
force
new
the
state
city
law, right?
and other cities to deal with this issue. And so if you look at that plan, it's extensive. It's not just we're going to bus them out of here, right? We're going to enhance the beds that are available. We're going to add beds. We're going to there's a number of different things. They're going to create a database so that somebody can very quickly see if there's not space here, we can take them here, and try to coordinate the effort a little bit better.
And provide services. I
And
mean, one of the
provide
goals
services, right.
of JFRD is to tell people where they can get help or assistance.
And not even that, but if there's some mental health issues there's, which often is the case, where they can go to get that, enhance that program as well. I think the administration asked for $10 million. The city approved $1 million. So this is a work in progress. And this is a big issue, and it's not just a Jacksonville issue, especially with the housing prices and the lack of affordable. I mean, there's just so many elements to this problem that it'd be nice to say we'd have this $1 million solution and let's move on. It's just not that simple. And that's how I look at it.
Randy, the mayor on this program last month, I asked her about this Homeward Bound program, and she said basically there's a lot of things that I don't really love about this new approach, but the state law is tying our hands in a lot of ways. It is forcing us to enforce this no public sleeping ban.
I'm going to tell you a positive story. I had a homeless person in my district, and he kept coming back and coming back and coming back. And JSO would pick him up, take him to the jail because he had mental health issues. And as you know, the jail is the largest provider of mental health services. And we brought in Sulzbacher, and Sulzbacher would come in, try to help him get him on his meds. It was at least a 6 months to a year issue. We tried to get him back to his family. It was in Texas. He didn't want to go. And finally, he got healthy enough where he went home. And it was a very positive ending to that story.
Hmm.
So this doesn't necessarily have to be all bad. There's some positive here. People are probably getting services that they weren't receiving before. So, where we don't want them is on the street. That's not good for them, and that's not good for us as a community. So it's just, it's not perfect, but I did have a positive result from one of, in my district, and I'm hopeful that there are more of those.
Jasmine, to Randy's point, I mean, they're not just busing people anywhere. They are trying to find where they have roots or family ties and reconnect them with people who could be a support network for them. So they're not just sort of sending them anywhere with a one-way ticket. This is designed to get them connected with a support system.
Okay, I didn't know that, but just even hearing your story, I mean, I think if you hear more stories like that, people start to believe in this project, and invest and help. There are other programs too that are not a part of this that can volunteer or donate that helping homelessness. When you come outside, people leave outside for work early, late, for some reasons. Some people, I had a story of a homeless person breaking into an apartment complex over in the Riverside. So, those people you do want off the street. And oftentimes it's the mental health issues that they do have, and they don't have the help that they need. So that's an amazing story.
Yeah.
If I may get a shameless plug in, one of my folks I work with is Patriot Services Group, a nonprofit. They work especially with veterans, but this is the kind of thing that they do. They take folks who are at risk. One of the great success stories also through Sulzbacher was, somebody who couldn't get all of his veteran benefits lined up properly for a variety of reasons. They offered him an apartment at a complex that he would never have been able to qualify for, and he's now off the street.
Sure. Veterans is definitely one of those populations that is impacted by this problem. Jim, I just want to touch on a couple of additional topics. One is this idea of a Governor Gaetz. Matt Gaetz obviously was a former congressman. Then he was floated for attorney general, stepped down because of this sex scandal that found that he had regularly been paying for sex and drugs. But now he's saying he might consider, running in 2026.
I think a lot of people, from what I'm reading, are taken aback by that and what that could do to the campaign. Apparently, Gaetz has also been talking to Donald Trump about the possibility of that, and at least according to a report, I think it was in the Tampa Tribune, that that Trump told him, well, there's some other candidates that might be that I support as well that are in the state, consider running. But what I wonder what's going to happen with Matt Gaetz, and if he does decide to do that, and he said this week he's thinking about it to run for governor.
He said he needs to talk to his wife and pray on it, I think.
Yeah. But think about what that will do with the campaign that will be coming up. It will be so centered on why should you be running because of all of this that we're not going to be getting into the issues. We're not going to be getting into the important things of it. It's going to be why Matt Gaetz should be governor or why he shouldn't. And I think that's going to be interesting on that. He says if he does run, he would really look at the insurance industry and what's happening here in Florida. But you got to wonder, and I can say this now since I'm not reporting, you got to wonder what that's going to do to the campaign. Is that really fair? It's all going to be about him and not about Florida and about the issues.
It does seem like it would be a distraction. I mean, if nothing else, Randy DeFoor, obviously there's a lot of room for improvement in the insurance world,
Sure.
and anybody that's promising to tackle that would get some traction. But his bio is difficult.
Well, this is not a surprise to me. We've known that Matt was looking at this run for a while now. His father was previously in the Florida Senate, president of the Senate. He ran again for the Senate, won, so he's in the Florida Senate. This has been teed up for a while. The problem, if you call it a problem, is that we no longer have two primaries. So what happens with that is that people that have the majority vote, which is not much, doesn't require much, like 20%, actually will be the winner of the party. and you see it on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
So this gives Matt Gaetz a huge advantage, and he knows it.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I would not be shocked if Matt Gaetz is the Republican candidate for governor.
Interesting. I want to take a quick call here from Kathleen. Good morning, Kathleen. Go ahead.
Good morning. I'm back on the homeless issue. I'm not homeless, but I've talked to people that I see in my neighborhood, and they are scared to go to shelters because they're telling me there's no private space. They're scared of getting robbed. They're scared of being assaulted, especially if they're women. So what are we doing about that, please? Thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen. I mean, certainly living in a shelter is nobody's ideal of a perfect home.
No.
You know, and the Sulzbacher Center and City Rescue do their best, I know, to keep those places safe and make sure people don't have weapons and drugs and stuff when they're going in. But it is, it can be a challenging population to work with.
I've heard that from many people when I would talk to people on the street. If you remember that huge homeless camp that used to be in downtown Jacksonville, and I said, well, why not go to it? And they would say, no, I do not want to do that because it takes away a lot of my rights. A lot of people say, well, they'll just talk religion to me. They'll just talk, and they go, I want to be on my own. I'm sorry I'm out here, but I'm doing better here than I would do in a shelter. And I think that's the hard thing that the government has to deal with.
Right.
Is that's the choice that people are making.
I mean, and shelters are not a 24-hour facility. I mean, people, even when they're staying in a shelter, typically have to get up and leave during the daytime and be about their business elsewhere.
To respond to the caller, and I don't know the stats, and maybe somebody can find them in the short order, but I would argue that, are you any safer out on the street? Are you any safer in an encampment where there's no security? There's no maybe a camera. I mean, yes, being in a shelter, not ideal, and the taking away of rights and not being able to call your own shots, all those things very much could be a reason not to go there. But I think safety, I would be more hesitant to depend on the stats for that argument.
The stories that I've covered, that they say that they are safer when they go in the street. They do feel like they are.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to leave it there, folks. We've been talking to Randy DeFoor, John Bachman, Jim Piggott, Jasmine Monroe. Thank you all for being here. And just a quick note, obviously we're monitoring those fires out in California. If you do want to donate to help people living there, you can reach out to the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, and the World Central Kitchen.